Right before the mock exam at school, someone had put something into my water bottle. Because of that, Nina, the class beauty, managed to surpass me and win the only guaranteed admission slot. My childhood friend Ethan spoke softly to comfort me, saying, "It's okay, there's still the college entrance exam." But on the day of the college exam, I was kidnapped. Ethan missed the most important exam of his life because he came to rescue me. To repay him, I promised to marry him. Many years later, Nina, glowing with her achievements after graduating from a prestigious university, came to my wedding. But unexpectedly, I overheard the conversation between the two of them. Ethan smiled brightly and said to Nina, "Thanks to you, she missed both exams. Otherwise, I definitely wouldn't have been able to marry her." Nina let out a slight, mocking laugh. "Who told her to be the daughter of my dad's ex-wife? If I don't push her into the mud, how could my mom ever lift her head in front of that woman?" In a fit of rage, I drove straight into them. The horrifying accident killed all three of us. When I opened my eyes again, I realized I had been reborn, back to my senior year of high school. During break time, Nina stood in front of me and spoke gently. "Lily, let me get you some water. You can still review 2 more lessons during the break." Before I could respond, she took the empty cup from my desk and walked away. From the last row, Ethan walked over and sat right beside me. "Nina is really nice to you. She's always ranked second, but still happily looks after you." His words made me let out a cold laugh. It sounded as if I owed her something enormous. My classmates glanced over and whispered quietly, "Is Lily bullying the class beauty again? Aren't they supposed to be close friends?" "Still?" Nina looked so timid around her. Growing up together like that makes it easy to be pushed around. Hearing that, a faint flash of pride crossed Ethan's eyes, though he pretended to be angry and shouted, "Enough! Lily isn't that kind of person." Then he looked at me, his gaze full of emotion. "Lily, even if everyone misunderstands you, I will always stand by your side." I didn't reply. I couldn't even lift my eyelids because I remembered clearly. Today was the day I drank the cup of water Nina brought me. Then got poisoned, became severely dehydrated, passed out, missed the mock exam, and lost my guaranteed admission. Meanwhile, she jumped from her usual distant second place to first. Mr. Parker, our homeroom teacher, could only sigh regretfully. "I know what you're capable of, but rules are rules. They can't be changed. Since you are absent, the guaranteed admission will go to Nina." He understood my circumstances and how desperately I longed for the award given to the top student. His voice trembled, as if even he didn't have the heart to say it. Even the 4-year full college tuition waiver had to be transferred to Nina. I had been an abandoned orphan since childhood. It was Ethan's grandmother who picked me up and raised me. The Carter family was poor, extremely poor. She didn't take me in out of pity, but because she wanted to raise me as Ethan's future wife, so he wouldn't need to pay a bride price later. From then on, I lived in the Carter household doing housework, washing clothes, cooking, feeding chickens, raising pigs, everything, yet I was never fed enough or given proper clothes. Fortunately, due to the compulsory 9-year education policy, when Chief Miller brought the police to the Carter house, I was forced to attend middle school. High school tuition was waived, so as long as I worked during holidays, I could earn enough to survive. But college was different. College tuition was expensive. I had been working hard for the past 3 years just to win the mock exam reward. 4 years of free college tuition, because I knew the Carter family would never let me go to college. They even told me directly, "If you get into college and see the outside world," they were certain that if I went to college and saw the outside world, I would never agree to marry Ethan or stay with the Carter family. That was why they tried everything they could to keep me trapped in this poor, desolate village. In my previous life, after missing the mock exam, I went back to school, planning to take the cup and have it tested at the hospital. But no matter how hard I searched, I couldn't find it. When I went with Mr. Parker to the office to check the surveillance cameras, we were told the cameras had been broken for a week. The last recorded image showed Ethan playing ball in the classroom, and the ball bounced up and struck the camera, shattering it. With all those coincidences, it wasn't as if I had never suspected Ethan. But later, when he missed the college exam just because he went searching for me, all my doubts faded completely. Who would have thought that everything had been a script he wrote and performed himself, just to make me feel indebted to him for life? He knew very well he couldn't get into college. He had no interest in studying, and he was terrified that if I got into a good school, moved beyond his social class, I would eventually leave him. So he and Nina schemed together to destroy my bright future. Nina placed the freshly poured cup of water on my desk. I gave her a timid smile. "Lily, I mixed it half hot and half cold for you. It's just right to drink. Go ahead." I lowered my head to do my work and only murmured a faint, not even bothering to look at her. Her lips trembled and her eyes instantly reddened. "Lily, did I do something wrong? Why are you treating me so coldly?" Nina was well liked in class and had a striking appearance, so quite a few people immediately spoke up for her. "Class president, what's wrong with you? She kindly poured you water and you act all cold like that. Don't you even know how to say thank you? Do you really need to ignore her like that?" I didn't bother to look up, only said softly, "Thank you." The ones who had just been attacking me suddenly choked on their words. Nina's soft sobbing sounded through the room. She swallowed her frustration and slowly walked back to her seat. I glanced at my cup of water, then at the identical one on Nina's desk. Nina and Ethan came from the same village, but Nina's family was a bit better off. A lot of my belongings were things she had already used and then passed down to me. Because of that, I had always felt grateful, even when she liked to stand in front of everyone and jokingly say things like, "That shirt Lily is wearing? I gave it to her. It was too big on me, but it fits her perfectly." She said things like that so often, it became a habit. Back in elementary school, our classmates used to tease me for being a beggar, someone who picked up things other people didn't want and treated them like treasure. Later, when we reached high school, whenever she bought anything, she would buy two and force one into my hands. If I didn't accept it, she would hand it to Ethan's grandmother, so I'd feel obligated to take it back. I thought I had escaped the reputation of being a beggar, but instead, I was called someone who imitated others. All the money I earned from part-time jobs was used to pay her back. I didn't want to owe anyone, especially not Nina. I once thought that everyone had flaws. Skills could be improved, but human hearts were never perfect. Whatever her intentions were, at the very least, thanks to her I had clothes to wear and a cup to use. But right before my death, I finally learned the truth about my identity. I was actually Nina's older half-sister. We shared the same father. All the malice I had once suspected was never an illusion. In the reflection of the window, I saw Nina's eyes, silently fixed on the cup on my desk. I deliberately picked it up. Her pupils tightened slightly, the corners of her mouth twitching with something like excitement. At that very moment, I set the cup back down. Her gaze shrank instantly. Her teeth clamped tightly together, and her fingers dug into her palms so hard they trembled. For the entire class period, I didn't do anything at all. I lifted the cup up and set it down, then lifted it again and set it down once more, tormenting every last nerve in her body. By the end of the period, Nina's once clear eyes were streaked red with veins, and her whole body was shaking uncontrollably. I let out a soft laugh. With a fragile mind like that, she still dared to do something so cruel? When the bell signaling the end of class rang, Nina jumped to her feet instantly. I picked up my cup, moved my throat as if I were drinking a few gulps, and only then did she finally sit back down, letting out a relieved sigh as if she had just escaped hell. I set the cup down and lowered my head onto the desk, pretending to rest. From the corner of my eye, I saw Nina pull Ethan out of the classroom. Taking advantage of the moment when both of them were gone, I poured all the water from my cup into an empty plastic bottle and stuffed it deep inside my backpack. Then I carefully arranged the cup back onto my desk as if nothing had happened. Not long after, Nina returned. She deliberately walked past me, picked up my cup, and the lightness of it made her so happy she couldn't hide it. "Lily, let me pour you some more water," she said cheerfully, grabbing my cup and running out like a child who had just gotten a perfect score. In the next class, I clutched my stomach and pretended to be in so much pain that tears streamed down my face. From the reflection in the wall mirror, I saw the corner of Nina's mouth curl up slightly. Her gaze slid toward Ethan in the back row, and the two exchanged a triumphant look. I knew the moment had come. Holding my stomach tightly, I stood up with a limp. "Teacher, my stomach hurts so much. May I go outside?" Our English teacher, who loved me the most, and was also our homeroom teacher, immediately became anxious. In my previous life, when I missed the college entrance exam, he was the one who ran everywhere trying to save me. Even when I was banned from taking the exam, he went all the way to the Carter house to tell Ethan's grandmother that if they couldn't afford it, he was willing to pay for me to repeat the year. But she beat him with a broom and threw him out of the house, then even ran to school to cause a scene, accusing him of having improper intentions toward me. As a result, he was suspended and scolded by many parents. Even so, later on, when I followed Ethan down south to work in a factory, he still sent messages encouraging me. "Lily, you missed the exam, but you haven't missed your whole life. You can take it again or choose another path. Life is long. Never give up on yourself." Now, seeing me drenched in sweat, with tears on my face and my complexion as pale as paper, he immediately called someone to take me to the infirmary. I had experienced the excruciating pain in my previous life, so acting it out this time took no effort at all. Nina and Ethan also came to check on me. Seeing my pale face and how I kept running in and out of the bathroom, they finally felt assured enough to return to class. During the last evening's self-study session, I asked the teacher for permission to go to the hospital outside school for observation. Back in the classroom, Mr. Parker looked at the attendance list and said with a frustrated sigh, "Why is this happening again? Lily has to be hospitalized at this time? Isn't the mock exam tomorrow?" He paced anxiously. "No, I have to go see how she's doing." After the homeroom teacher left, Nina and Ethan were overjoyed, as if they had won the lottery. On the way home, Nina even hummed a tune, as if the sky that day was blue just for her. The next morning, I didn't show up for early self-study. Seeing my empty seat, Nina finally relaxed. Our exam rooms were at 2 different test sites. Worried about my health, Mr. Parker personally drove me to my exam site and repeatedly reminded me of things to be careful about. When the test ended, he drove me back to school. The moment Nina saw me return to class, she rushed over with a deliberately regretful expression. "Lily, what a pity. Why did you miss the exam?" I smiled calmly. "It's okay, there's still the college entrance exam." She sighed, then added with a tone of fake sympathy laced with pride, "But you know, this mock exam comes with a guaranteed admission slot and a full tuition waiver." The bell rang, and Nina went back to her seat, placing her cup of water down. I noticed a small piece of paper under the cup. The handwriting was soft and delicate, exactly like Ethan's. "Nina, enjoy your drink." But that note was written by me. I had woken up at dawn and practiced until my hand went numb, just to replicate Ethan's handwriting perfectly. And the water in the cup was the water I had switched out that day. Nina took a small sip, and the sweetness spread across her lips. Her mouth curved up as her eyes filled with happiness. When Ethan walked by with a basketball in his arms, Nina even blushed and gave him a meaningful blink. Ethan froze, scratched his head, and smiled cluelessly. At that moment, Nina became even more convinced that the note had been written for her by Ethan. Not even one class period had passed before she finished the whole cup. When the break bell rang, she stood up, ready to look for Ethan, but suddenly collapsed to the floor, clutching her stomach and convulsing. She struggled to crawl up, staggering toward the restroom, and then disappeared for 2 full periods. The homeroom teacher sent someone to look for her and eventually found her unconscious in the hallway right outside the bathroom, severely dehydrated and in a deep faint, exactly like what happened to me in my previous life. Ethan frowned as he watched Nina being carried away, then turned to me. "Lily, why is Nina's condition exactly like yours before, and even worse?" His voice wasn't quiet at all, the whole class could hear him. Immediately, someone chimed in. "Yeah, class president, did you pass your sickness to the class beauty? Don't spread it to us, the college entrance exam is coming." Another voice added, "If you're sick, just stay home, Lily. Don't drag the whole class down. Everyone knows you're dirt poor and orphan. Who knows, maybe you have some contagious disease you can't afford to treat. I bet she got it from you." Accusations and insults erupted one after another. The classroom became so loud it felt like it was about to explode. I looked at Ethan. He remained indifferent, not a trace of sympathy in his eyes. Instead, the more they insulted me, the brighter his expression became, the higher the corners of his lips lifted. It was as if the more humiliation I suffered, the happier he felt. He once told me, "Lily, you're the most important person in my life." But that so-called affection had always pushed me into the deepest pit of humiliation. As soon as Mr. Parker walked into the room, several students rushed up to him. "Teacher, Nina's condition is exactly like Lily's before. She definitely got it from her. We're about to take the college exam. What if she infects the whole class? You have to make her stay home. If not, we'll report this to the district office." Every word was like a cold blade stabbing into my chest. And, as usual, Ethan stepped into his favorite role. He always enjoyed watching me get torn apart by everyone's anger and then swooping in like a hero to shield me, pretending to be noble and protective, when all of these storms were orchestrated by him from the beginning. I looked at him with an icy gaze. As expected, in the very next second, Ethan stepped in front of me, speaking with righteous indignation. "What nonsense are you all spouting? Lily isn't an orphan anymore. My family adopted her. I won't allow you to spread lies. Lily is perfectly healthy. Last time was just a stomachache, and Nina too, clearly food poisoning. That's all." Then he turned around and gave me that gentle, sickeningly fake look. "Lily, with me here, no one will dare to bully you." The class was about to keep arguing when, bang, Mr. Parker slammed his book onto the desk. "Do any of you have evidence? Any proof that Lily infected Nina? How dare you make accusations without a shred of evidence? All these years studying, did all your knowledge go straight to the dogs?" The classroom fell silent instantly, leaving only a few trembling whispers. "But their symptoms really are the same," someone whispered, but Mr. Parker's voice, cold and sharp. "The day Nina got sick, I was the one who took her to the hospital. I saw every test result. If she had any illness, wouldn't I know better than any of you?" He pulled a sheet of paper from his bag and waved it in front of the class. "This is her test result from that day. Look at it carefully, and when you're done, those of you who've been barking had better apologize properly." The paper was passed from hand to hand. Each student who read it immediately fell silent, their expressions awkward as they lowered their heads. Eventually, the test report landed in Ethan's hands. Every word on it was crystal clear. Normal. No abnormalities detected. Mr. Parker slammed the desk, his voice full of anger. Lily had hypoglycemia caused by exam stress. She got dizzy and went to the restroom. Nina, on the other hand, had food poisoning. Those are two completely different things. Do any of you still dare talk nonsense? The classroom fell completely silent. No one uttered even a single protest. Ethan's smile vanished as if blown out by the wind. He jerked his head up, his eyes filled with horror and disbelief as he stared at me. I looked back at him with cold indifference, as if I were looking at a stain on the wall. My stare made him shiver. Now he finally knew that I had discovered their scheme, how they put something in my water. I opened my mouth, speaking slowly, each word sharp as a blade. "Ethan, get away from me, as far away as possible. You really disgust me." Without waiting for his reaction, I returned to my seat and calmly opened my test paper, working on it as though nothing had happened. I ignored Ethan's panicked stare and the uneasy looks from everyone else. Mr. Parker frowned, his voice thick with disappointment. "Ethan, Lily is the pride of our whole school. If she passes the exams, she'll inspire countless students after her. Could you stop dragging her down? Her score is 3 times yours. Aren't you ashamed?" Ethan's face went pale. He staggered back to his seat, moving as if his legs barely worked. The entire day, his ghostly stare clung to me relentlessly. Even when others invited him to visit Nina in the hospital, he shook his head and refused. Ethan and I were never the same. I earned my place at this prestigious high school through ability. He bought his way in, but before he transferred here, everyone in class knew I was an orphan. Still, not a single person mocked or belittled me. In fact, they once pooled money to help with my living expenses. They told me, "Lily, study hard. We believe you'll get into a good college." But after he arrived, everything changed. Whenever a boy talked to me, Ethan would immediately go around telling others, "That girl was picked up by my grandma." She's the daughter-in-law my family raised. She eats the Carters' food, so she'll belong to the Carters for life. In a high-pressure academic environment, people were desperate for gossip. His rumors were like throwing a torch into dry grass. Overnight, everyone in the grade knew. From then on, whenever I walked by a group of students, they would burst into laughter. "Hey, Ethan, your little wifey is here." Their laughter echoed down the hallway, slicing into my ears like a razor to my heart. Every shred of dignity I had was trampled and crushed beneath their feet. And Ethan? He only enjoyed it more. The attention and the drama. With Nina fanning the flames beside him, their stories spread faster, and the impression people had of me worsened by the day. They said I was jealous of Nina's beauty and bullied her because of it. And just like that, the label of a copycat, a pathetic imitator, clung to me like a nightmare I couldn't wake from, suffocating my entire youth. I fought my way out of that school, out of that poor mountain village, and passed the exam to escape that small-minded town. It was my only hope, if I could just survive those 3 years of high school. That afternoon, right after class, Ethan came looking for me again, using his favorite tactic, pretending to be pitiful. To be honest, Ethan was very handsome, and he knew exactly how to use his looks to win people over. Whenever he put on a pitiful expression, before I even had time to react, a few girls nearby would rush to defend him, gradually making it seem like I was the one being cruel to him. He lowered his voice and said softly, "Lily, my grandma cooked dinner and told me to bring you home to eat." I quietly slipped my books into my bag and answered flatly, "I'm not going back." A flicker of panic crossed his eyes, as if he had just heard the sky was falling. "You're not going back?" "I'll never go back there again." I pulled out a sheet of paper from my bag, the one with the official red stamp, and held it up in front of him. Every word on it was clear. Certificate of termination of adoption. Ethan Carter. "From today on," I said, "there is no relationship between me and your family. And as for you and me, we're done. If you dare to say again that I'm your raised fiancé, or that I must marry you in the future, I'll report your grandmother for abuse and unlawful confinement of a minor." Ethan's face went as pale as the paper in his hands. His voice trembled, cracking. "Lily, how can you do this? My grandma raised you. How can you be so ungrateful and even accuse her like that?" Students around us had overheard and quickly gathered. Inside the classroom, outside in the hallway, the crowd swelled, everyone eager to watch the drama unfold. It was Friday afternoon, and since school had a day and a half off, students from other classes also flocked over. Ethan raised his voice, letting his eyes glisten with tears, making sure every word reached the crowd. "My grandma raised her for years, and now she dares to slander her like this. Everyone, tell me, is that even human?" Whispers erupted instantly, like fire catching dry grass. I let out a dry, mocking laugh. "She didn't take me in out of kindness. She took me in so she wouldn't have to pay for a future daughter-in-law for you, Ethan. I was 4 when I came to your house, and I already had to stand on a chair to cook. I didn't have a single decent piece of clothing. When I talked about going to school, she refused to register my residency because she was afraid I'd run away. In the end, it took the village secretary to confirm she had no right to keep me and that they would send me to an orphanage. Only then did she finally register me. And only with police intervention did I get to go to school. I was 16. Ethan's face flushed with shame and anger. He glared at me through narrowed eyes. "Lily, stop, don't say any more." I scoffed, unafraid, tears beginning to burn at the corners of my eyes. "Why shouldn't I say it? You call me ungrateful? You say your grandmother raised me? When I was 14, she locked you inside my room in the middle of the night, told you to obey her, to force yourself onto me so I wouldn't be able to run away and would have no choice but to become your wife. If I hadn't grabbed scissors and stabbed myself to scare you, I would have been destroyed by you and your grandmother long ago. You thought I wouldn't dare say anything because it would ruin my reputation? That because I'm a girl, I'd be too ashamed to speak? So you just did whatever you wanted, shamelessly, for years, didn't you?" My voice trembled with fury as I continued. "Well, Ethan, I don't need to protect my reputation anymore. All I want is to take the college entrance exam. I just want to survive. You say your family raised me for years. Did your family ever give me a single dollar? My school fees were waived, living expenses were also free, and any free time I had, I worked part-time. At your house, I did every chore, and your grandmother even took my money. What gratitude do you think your family deserves from me?" I stepped toward him, my voice ringing through the silent classroom like thunder. The room exploded. Students around us began shouting accusations at Ethan, hot, crackling fury filling the air. "Aren't you ashamed, Ethan? How dare you even claim you two are a couple? The class president is so outstanding, and what are you besides a filthy toad? Look at yourself. Do you even deserve her? She's had it harder than a child laborer because of you." The harsh criticism struck Ethan's face like hailstones. As a senior desperate to save face, his pride snapped. He suddenly stomped hard on the nearest desk and roared in anger. Unfortunately for him, that desk belonged to the sports committee rep, who immediately grabbed Ethan by the collar. "Are you crazy?" he shouted. "Why'd you kick my desk? Don't you have your own?" Enraged, Ethan threw a punch straight into the boy's face. The rep shoved him back, and the two launched into a full-on fistfight. Their scuffle quickly spread to the students around them. Several boys who had disliked Ethan for a long time jumped in to help, and soon the fight between two people escalated into a chaotic brawl. Ethan's cries of pain echoed across the classroom, but I simply packed my books, slung my backpack over my shoulder, and headed quietly toward the back door to leave. Just as I reached it, I unexpectedly came face to face with Mr. Parker. His eyes were deep and complicated. I had no idea how much he had heard. My mouth opened, then closed again. My gaze dropped to the floor as shame flooded my chest. I had always seen him as a guiding light, the mentor of my life. For 3 years, he not only taught me but quietly supported me in countless ways. The compulsory education policy only covered tuition. Everything else, books, photocopies, daily expenses, was reduced only because the principal felt sympathetic. But later, when I returned to visit the school after growing up, I learned the truth. The principal had only waived my dorm fees. Everything else, Mr. Parker had paid for out of his own pocket. He also knew that every weekend I worked heavy labor jobs to earn money. So he deliberately asked me to tutor his elementary-aged son, paying me a proper wage. Back then, I was naive and thought he genuinely needed a tutor. Only later did I understand what high school teacher can't teach a child in elementary school. He was simply finding a way to protect my fragile dignity so I could receive help without feeling humiliated. Standing before his gentle eyes now, I felt tears burn painfully at the corners of my eyes. He placed a light hand on my shoulder, his voice thick with emotion. "Lily, even in the mountains, a phoenix can rise. A parasol tree may grow in a valley, but it still reaches for the sky. You will have the life you want." I glanced at my classmates. In their eyes, I saw shame, regret, and guilt. No trace of mockery left. That night, as I slept in the dormitory, the dorm manager woke me up, saying someone was calling for me. On the other end of the line was Ethan's trembling voice. "Lily, don't hang up. I need to tell you something. You know everything now, right? Even if I did put something in your drink, I swear it wasn't all my idea." I frowned, gripping the phone tightly. "Ethan, you still think you're innocent?" His voice quivered as if he were about to cry. "Lily, I was just afraid you'd leave me, afraid you'd pass the exam, meet new people, and forget about me. I can't lose you." I let out a cold laugh, sharp as the night wind. "Ethan, I was never with you to begin with. Stop deluding yourself." On the other end, his breath hitched sharply. Then he inhaled deeply. "You're still mad, right? Lily, there's still the college entrance exam. You're always in the top 10. Someone will sponsor your tuition, and even if no one helps you, I'll earn money to support you through college. I'll prove I can make it up to you. Beep. I hung up before he could finish. After Nina was discharged from the hospital and returned to school, during the very first break period, Nina cornered Ethan. "I was in the hospital for days. Why didn't you come visit me?" Ethan shot her an annoyed glance. "Can you stay away from me?" Nina froze, her eyes instantly reddening. "What do you mean? If I hadn't drunk the cup you gave me, how would I have gotten sick?" Ethan frowned and shoved her aside. "Are you insane? Who gave you water?" She turned toward me, confusion swirling in her eyes. I simply let out a faint, cold smile without answering. Nina immediately understood something. She rushed over, grabbed my wrist tightly. "It was you, wasn't it? You did it? A sharp smack rang out as I forcefully brushed her hand away. My voice was calm to the point of being chilling. I have no idea what you're talking about. Nina trembled with rage. You're taking revenge on me, aren't you? I raised an eyebrow, lips curving. Revenge on you? For what? What exactly have you done that would make you worth taking revenge on? Nina clenched her fists, her gaze darting toward Ethan. Ethan stared at the ground, not daring to look at me. A bitter, icy laugh slipped from Nina's lips. Lily, you're not afraid I'll call the police? If this gets exposed, your life will be ruined. I smiled, a soft, gentle smile that still made people's blood run cold. Then go check the surveillance cameras. Ethan's eyes flickered with panic. He immediately slipped out of the classroom through the back door without looking back. Soon the only people left in the room were me and Nina. She crossed her arms, chin lifted arrogantly. I didn't expect this, Lily. After all these years pretending to be kind and obedient, you finally show your true colors. I said nothing, waiting. But even if you want revenge, so what? She sneered. You still haven't taken the mock exam. First place belongs to me. The school's only guaranteed admission slot is mine. The 4-year scholarship is mine. You know, I don't even need any of that. The only reason I made sure to crush them is because I knew they were your lifeline. She leaned in slightly, voice dripping with contempt. So go ahead. Rot forever in this miserable little town. I lifted an eyebrow, giving her an easy, quiet smile. Is that so? Then let's wait and see. Nina snorted coldly, lips curling in disdain. Keep acting tough. Let's see how long you can keep that smile. The inter-school exam results were posted right after the evening self-study session. Mr. Parker brought in a printed copy of the rankings, his face glowing with excitement, holding his familiar cup of warm water. Everyone, come take a look. Nina sat arrogantly in her seat, lazily leaning back with a smug expression, casting me a provocative glance. I sipped my water and didn't bother moving as the students surged toward the front of the classroom to crowd around the score sheet. Nina remained where she was, waiting for the gasps of admiration, the chorus of praise calling her name. Instead, a shocked voice erupted. Oh my God! The gap between first place and second place is over 100 points. The smile nearly slipped off Nina's face. Then someone let out a quiet laugh. Class president is incredible, completely crushed Nina. The difference isn't even small. Nina's face turned scarlet. What did you say? No way. She stumbled out of her seat, pushing through the crowd and lunging toward the podium. She snatched the score sheet, her eyes widening as she read and reread each line. She slapped her forehead, squeezed her eyes shut, then opened them again, but nothing changed. The name Lily Carter shone brightly in first place. Nina's hands shook uncontrollably. Her eyes reddened as she screamed, You tricked me, Lily. You dared to deceive me. I clasped her wrist with an icy calmness. I didn't take revenge on you during the exam, Nina. Do you know why? I leaned close to her ear, each word cutting into her pride like the edge of a knife. Because I'm strong enough to crush you with my own ability, so you can finally understand that between you and me, there's a distance you will never cross in your entire life. If you can't surpass someone, then you should learn to accept defeat. I flung her hand away, and Nina fell hard onto the floor, bursting into sobs. In that moment, she looked exactly like I had in my previous life. Back when losing my chance at the mock exam made me feel as if the entire sky had collapsed. The world had gone pitch black, and the only escape left was death. Thankfully, there was still the college entrance exam, but then I missed that too. Afterward, Ethan and I went south to work. While working, I studied those exam papers again and again, the mock exam, the college exam. I memorized every question, every period, every comma, because it was the future I had lost. When Ethan came back from PE, he saw the score sheet. The moment he realized I ranked first, he froze for a few seconds, then fell silent. Unlike Nina, he didn't scream or lose control. He just sank into a terrifying silence. But before I could even catch my breath, I received an unexpected visitor. Nina's father, Thomas Wells, the owner of the biggest supermarket chain in the city, lived only a few steps away from the Carter house. I had called him Uncle Wells for 18 years. For 18 years, he had watched me be mistreated, bullied, and almost turned into a child without legal residency by the Carter family. Yet not once did he intervene. Not a shred of pity, not a single word of concern. It wasn't until I grew older, piecing together bits of gossip from the villagers, that I finally discovered the truth. His ex-wife was my mother. She died of hemorrhage giving birth to my baby brother, a mother and child dead within half a month. Then, less than 2 weeks later, Thomas brought home another woman, heavily pregnant. That woman became Nina's mother. After Mr. Parker left, only 2 people remained in the office, Thomas Wells and me. He looked at me with a gentle, fake smile, his voice full of pride. "You've grown up. You really have a future ahead of you. You're the first in the village to get into a university. So impressive, Lily." His eyes weren't looking at a daughter, they were admiring a medal he could show off. I asked coldly, "Mr. Wells, what do you want?" He sighed, eyes glistening, voice trembling like a cheap melodrama. "Lily, the truth is, I'm your father. Back then, I couldn't acknowledge you because of Mrs. Zhang. But now you're grown, about to go to college. Even if I have to divorce her, I want to take you back." I didn't believe him, but after 2 lifetimes, watching people act was as easy as breathing. He took me for a DNA test. When the results came out, I threw myself into his arms and sobbed like a broken child. "Dad, you don't understand. When I was little and saw you love Nina, I used to wish you were my father. I never thought you truly were." Thomas pulled me close and smiled kindly as he brought me back to his small countryside villa. The moment Nina saw me, she completely lost control. She rushed toward me and shoved me so hard that I fell to the floor. I didn't say a word, just let a few tears slip down. Thomas immediately slapped her across the face. "She's your sister. What do you think you're doing? Get to your room now." Nina wailed and ran off. Mrs. Zhang stood by the doorway, clenching her teeth so hard it looked like her jaw might snap. Thanks to Thomas, I easily filed the paperwork to remove my residency registration from the Carter family. At first, Ethan's grandmother refused to sign, no matter what. Not until Thomas hired some thugs to pay Ethan a visit. Ethan was ambushed on his way home, stuffed into a burlap sack and beaten so badly his face was swollen beyond recognition and his leg was broken. His grandmother screamed and cried like a madwoman, and in the end, she had no choice but to hand over the household registry. Just like that, something that had once been harder than climbing to the heavens became as trivial as a blade of grass in Thomas Wells's hands. Evil truly needs to be handled by someone just as ruthless. After that, I didn't need to go to school anymore. I stayed at home every day, cooking, making soup, acting obedient and filial toward Thomas Wells, gentle and considerate to the point no one could find a flaw. I played the role of the obedient, gentle daughter, something Nina had never once managed to pull off in her entire life. She had always been spoiled, so the more I pretended to be meek and well-behaved, the more pitiful she looked whenever anyone compared us. Thomas Wells began looking at me with growing approval, and each word of praise he gave me twisted deeper into Nina's heart like a knife. She couldn't stand seeing me lower my head sweetly as I offered him a bowl of soup. She couldn't stand the affectionate, fatherly way he looked at me. She screamed, she cried, she smashed bowls and dishes, and every time she did, she was scolded. Or, when he was angrier, beaten. And so the Wells household repeated that vicious cycle day after day, turning into a battlefield every single night. Under that psychological pressure, Nina was on the verge of a complete breakdown. She couldn't study at all. On the day of the college entrance exam, I arrived at the test center on time. When Nina saw me, her eyes looked as if she wanted to carve me into pieces. "What are you doing here?" I smiled, my voice soft but sharp as a blade. "Retaking the exam. So you understand that the last time you lost to me, it wasn't luck. It was my ability. Nina, you will forever be the one beneath my feet. That's your fate." Her eyes trembled, filled with both hatred and fear, as I walked straight into the exam room without looking back. When the results were released, my score was more than 200 points higher than hers. She barely scraped into a third-tier university. Thomas Wells frowned with disgust. "You couldn't even get into a good school? All these years I paid for your tutoring. I could have bought a house with that money. Useless." Nina broke into hysterical sobs. I gently held out a bowl of hot soup and said softly, "Dad, don't be angry. Have some soup. Your health matters most." Mrs. Zhang slapped the bowl out of my hands and lunged at me. A sharp crack rang out as Thomas slapped her instead. "She's your sister. What are you doing? Get to your room." The Wells household fell into chaos like a war zone. That night, I quietly packed my luggage, deliberately making noise. As expected, Thomas opened the door. "Lily, what are you doing?" I lowered my head, letting my voice tremble just enough while weighing every word carefully. "I don't have a mother anymore. Now I only have you. I really want to stay by your side, Dad. But I don't want to cause you trouble in Beijing. I found a part-time job at an education center. I'll call you often, I promise." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. He pulled a bank card from his pocket and placed it in my hand. "There's 150,000 yuan in here. Take it first. If it's not enough, tell me." I pretended to decline politely a few times, then accepted the card gracefully, slipping it into my bag without a single tremor in my hand. Throughout college, my grades were outstanding, making Thomas Wells beam with pride in front of our relatives back in the countryside. Meanwhile, Nina, the legitimate daughter, became increasingly rebellious and out of control. Thomas and Mrs. Zhang argued constantly and honestly. What true affection remains between a man who once cheated and abandoned his wife and children? He had so many other women outside their marriage that I lost count long ago. As for me, I kept my rule: sweetness on the surface, ice beneath. I pretended to be gentle, obedient, and filial to the point that he trusted only me, talked only to me, and laughed only with me. Finally, using that obedient facade, I persuaded him to sponsor my overseas studies. For a man like Thomas, uneducated but obsessed with saving face, having a daughter studying abroad was the brightest medal he could wear. After returning, I began working at his supermarket. In just 2 years, I quietly transferred all of his assets into my name. When the supermarket was nothing but an empty shell, I walked away without looking back. My household registration had long been moved. Since my university days, I had erased every trace connecting me to the Wells family. After that, Nina's mother finally filed for divorce. Thomas completely collapsed. Years of indulgence and debauchery had hollowed his body like rotten wood, and it wasn't long before he was diagnosed with late-stage cancer. He called me countless times, and right before I changed my SIM card, I kindly answered one last call. "Lily, I'm not going to make it. Help your father one last time. Help me pay for the medicine. Please, save me." I let out a soft laugh, my voice sweet enough to freeze the air. "Mr. Wells, my mother died 18 years ago. You lived an extra 18 years after abandoning her. That's enough, isn't it? Go reunite with my mother. When you're dead, whatever money is needed for your funeral, I'll pay it all. But right now, I won't give you a single cent." I hung up before he could start cursing. That winter, he really died. When I returned to the city I once hated down to my bones, I stood before his altar. On the memorial tablet, I wrote my mother's name. On the funeral wreaths, I wrote my mother's name. The opera singers, the drummers, the monks chanting prayers. I hired all of them in her name. I even paid someone to repair her grave, repainting the faded pink tombstone. The guests at the funeral all froze in shock, but none of them dared to say a word. The opera stage drums thundered, gongs clanged, and beneath the canopy wine was poured and guests laughed. Only I remained perfectly calm, cold enough to chill the bones. Suddenly, Nina charged straight at me, a sharp knife gleaming in her hand. She lunged, aiming directly for my chest. But Ethan managed to shove me aside, and the two of them struggled violently. Screams and curses erupted throughout the hall. One swing of the knife came down and Ethan lost an entire hand. Nina was dragged away by the police, still shouting curses, her eyes bloodshot like a rabid animal. Before the ambulance took Ethan away, he looked back at me with a weak smile. "Lily, thank God you're okay." As Nina was escorted past me, her voice was hoarse with hatred. "It's you again. You and Ethan, conspiring to ruin me, right?" Then she whipped her head toward him. "You're really willing to do this for her? Lose a whole hand just for her?" Ethan went pale, lips trembling as if he wanted to say something. In the end, he only whispered, "Lily, I'm sorry." I cut him off coldly. "Don't apologize. You disgust me." After the funeral, I buried Thomas Wells far, far away, nowhere near where my mother rested. Back then, when he buried her, he didn't even give her a tombstone, just a mound of dirt. Now I returned it to him exactly the same. I had deceived him because even after his death, I couldn't bring myself to spend another cent on him. After all, I was still just a girl born in poverty down to the marrow. Surely, in whatever afterlife he ended up in, Mr. Wells would understand.